Back in 1995, a game called Chrono Trigger was released for the Super Nintendo, probably regarded as one of the best games of all time. However, Chrono Trigger is also probably one of the scariest games of all time in some aspects, because this just goes to prove to you that even if the game itself isn't a horror game, non-horror game elements can make for a very well-designed horror game, as ironic as that is, because you wouldn't expect it in a game like that. Chrono Trigger is a game where it ends up talking about, you know, you're supposed to believe that the game starts off like with this festival that takes place in the year 1000 AD, with time traveling and skipping some of the story. You end up going back to 600 AD to save this queen, which is actually a friend of yours from 1000 AD, your current time, mind you. And then you find out that after you survive a trial, you go 1000, you go somewhere past the year 2000. I'm trying to think exactly, I think it's 2030 or 2010 was the time in the actual game you go to. It's like the game doesn't really tell you what happened yet. It just, the whole world is just isolated. It's the future of the world. And then what's really scary is when you find out what caused it to really disintegrate. And then long and behold, this is where we find out that Lavos comes into picture. You know, if you've never played Chrono Trigger, you've probably undoubtedly heard of Lavos. It's probably regarded as one of the most fucked up things in video game history, like literally. In case you've never played Chrono Trigger, Lavos is a very old boss. I used to think that Lavos was probably the oldest boss I've ever seen in video game history. That was until I played Star Ocean 2, and you know, you have like deities and all that where they don't age, but you had like Indelcio, who's like 4 billion years old, and that guy's another scary ass fucker when you find out, you know, what he is capable of doing. But let's talk about Chrono Trigger though. So if you've never played Chrono Trigger for the Super Nintendo or the DS, you know, Lavos is I mean, it's still debatable, like, really what the hell it is, but it's supposed to be an alien parasite from another planet that crash landed into the Earth in the year 65 million BC, which, again, if you play Chrono Trigger, you'll learn this. You know, but what's really interesting, though, is that Lavos actually has the ability to time travel, as well as control time and space. And what probably makes it really disturbing, aside from its appearance, is what the hell it really is what it's able to do. See, Chrono Trigger states that Lavos, as well as the Lavos spawns, is what the game calls it, because there's this place called Death Peak, and you'll have to kill these baby Lavos, which are also pretty fucking powerful if you don't have the right items. But Lavos spawns are supposed to be like these alien... they say that they're not technically... Well, again, this is where we really get into the debate, like what they really are. Are they just planetary? Is it kind of like the X-parasites from like Metroid Fusion, where they're just living organisms that, you know, were just biological weapons that were somehow created through DNA and RNA, and it's just scary evolution where they came from space? Or was it something that an alien race kind of created, like Deoxys? If you ever played Pokemon, you know Deoxys was supposed to be like an alien, you know, the genetics and all that for it. But either way, it's a very powerful weapon. So Chrono Trigger has this sediment value where, you know, people don't forget this very easily, because this is what made Chrono Trigger like what it was. So in Chrono Trigger, it states that Lavos is not only really old and really powerful, but it crashed into Earth. So what happens is, the idea goes that Lavos and the Lavos spawns crash land into planets, and they immediately barrow towards the center of the center of the universe, or the planet's core rather. So, and then they start draining all the energy out of all the living organisms, suck their DNA, and it rapidly increases its RNA because its physical appearance is applying it to its own body and genetics, which causes it to rapidly become more powerful, which kind of makes sense. But the Lavos spawns are not nearly as old as the real Lavos. If you've ever played Chrono Trigger, again, you'll know that the same Lavos that is at the Ocean Palace, for example, the one that was over was 65 plus million years old or something like that, and the thing's like 600 feet tall or something like that. It's just like this giant big porcupine, which is pretty freaky scary. But anyways, so Lavos, like really debatably, like aside from like how it crash landed into the Earth's planet and it burrowed itself into the core of the planet, we can assume that because, you know, the way you fight Lavos, it's really like, it's not just, you know, like the outer shell is Lavos. It's actually just like, maybe it's like a spaceship, but with biological weapons and the ability to reproduce so fast. So what essentially what it is, it's like a living organism with other living organisms living inside of it, sort of. So, in other words, you have a very giant organ that you kill its first form, then you go inside of it, then you kill the brain and the organs, and then you finally kill the original Lavos, and then once you kill that bastard, he still lives on somehow, like his spirit still exists. So, he's not completely dead, but it's still fucking scary when you really think of how scary that cry it has is. And when you even encounter Lavos, you don't know what... You know, the thing that really scared me about it was, like, you don't know where it was from. You don't know what it was capable of doing. All you knew is that this damn thing came from space somewhere. It came from somewhere before their time, you know, like, the humans' time. And it was just this, you know, it was sleeping in the Earth's core, and then, like, what was it, 999 years later, there was, like, this tremors, and then all of a sudden, like, the thing would just open up and, it would just open up in the Earth's core, and it would just launch all these attacks that would just drain and destroy the entire Earth. And then it would fly off into another planet somewhere and just suck the life out of it. Or something like that. Pretty scary when you think about it in general. Because life is weird. It really is. And when you really think about what Lavos is, it's like this, it's a giant porcupine, but then it's like, you know, then it gets even stranger with the cellular, and then it just kind of gets even stranger when you really find out it kind of looks like just an alien in a ship, but it's not really just that. It's like this time-devouring, single-minded organism that just keeps constantly evolving. You know, I like to think of Lavos as like the definition of what evolution really is. And even though Lavos itself is like a video game character, it's not real, but, you know, evolution in fact does exist. And if you look at like how Lavos' story is portrayed in the video game series Chrono Trigger, you'll understand exactly how that works in the game itself, which is pretty cool. So I would like to think of Lavos as probably one of the scariest villains of all time, especially in a non-horror game. But it's just like, you know, it just goes to remind you that you haven't seen anything yet. And life is just unpredictable, but it could also be a horror element itself. What we don't know can hurt us.